Okay, we did it. Well, that's interesting. Oh, look at that. How did it get moved back to the center? We are new. I've never used a computer before, and the StreamYard thing, despite years and years of use, confounds me every time I use it. So somehow, for a brief split second there, James Ward appeared on the stream right in the middle, and then David Cramer just usurped his spot. We're joined with David Cramer, and obviously the one of the other amazing co-hosts of this channel, James Ward. David Cramer, can you introduce yourself so that I don't butcher it?
Yeah, I started Sentry a long time ago. If you don't know Sentry, we kind of do crash reporting and some other stuff, but we do it for most companies in the world at this point. Software engineer-ish, depends on the day of the week, I guess now. But more so recently with all the AI stuff. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of strong opinions, I guess, loosely held.
So Sentry, okay, I live in San Francisco. I'm not saying this is the same for everybody, but you cannot avoid Sentry here. It is on every billboard on the highway off the 80 there. And I'm sure that must make you smile just driving down. I think you visit at the very least this Bay Area, right? And so there's some Apple billboards that are very memorable, and then the Sentry ones make me chuckle because they're really good. And sometimes I don't get them. I mean, I get the idea. Sentry can't fix this, and then there's some implausibly terrible situation. It's like, well, yeah, but everything short of that, right? You could fix it. So what's the it's interesting you describe yourselves as crash reporting as opposed to like observability or something like that. What's the distinction?
So a long time ago, I don't know how you would describe it, to be honest with you, but if you said like error logging, it would not be what we do. And if you like think of a crash report, it's like a lot closer, even though like web apps don't really have like crash reports, if you will, generally speaking.
Unless you're using Ruby.
Yeah.
Or Windows and blue screens.
Yeah. But that is kind of the idea. And so it's like, I mean, observability, it's just a marketing term at the end of the day, right? So
yeah.
But it's similar. Like the way we think about what we do is we collect a bunch of data, like a lot of it, whenever there's like a problem in the application. So we do like distributed tracing, we do a bunch of stuff. We also do this sort of rich error report thing. And we do it very specifically focused on like the software itself. And so the idea is like JavaScript's a really good example. You write JavaScript, you ship it to a client device, something goes wrong, you need a bunch of information to like reproduce that to know what's going on. It's not a server, you can't log into it. Mobile apps, same thing. And so we do it for all software. But when you think about client-side software, it's much more obvious. Like, oh, yeah, okay, I need all that stuff. And we kind of do that, for most companies these days, especially like Bay Area. Like if you're a tech company, you're probably using Sentry for at least the error monitoring component or the crash reporting component, and then maybe some other stuff.
Well, because I suppose I didn't even think about that. I was thinking about, because again, before the show, I alluded to you that I knew of your wonderful, illustrious company because of Java legend Maciej Wall. Oh my goodness, he's gonna be so mad at because I've never successfully pronounced his last name. Walkowiak. I'm so sorry, friend. I've known him for a decade, and he's great, but I'm terrible with names. So anyway, I knew about Sentry because of the work he did on the Java SDK. It's really good. I mean, the Java experience for people using Sentry and Spring Boot, which is where I live, right? My brain is Spring Boot addled. Like that experience is par excellence, well done. So I've never even thought about the JavaScript people. That's a whole other kettle of fish. What about embedded? Like if I'm a C programmer or something, or I'm doing like firmware, is there a good story there? I mean,
yeah, we work everywhere. We're like, there's probably some like edge case stuff, but I will tell you, the like difficulty curve is interesting. And so I started it in Python, which is a pretty powerful language, albeit slow.
lovely.
But the reflection is like insanely powerful. So you could collect all this information pretty cheaply.
Right.
There's no transpilation, no compilation, kind of really at the end of the day. So it's like human readable. And then you just go down the stack from there. Java's pretty straightforward. There's some caveats, obviously, but then you get into like JavaScript, which is transpiled and on the client and in a browser that's not sandboxed, and so it's a mess. You get into like C and stuff, and it's completely compiled. You get symbols and everything. So we do all that. We're doing game consoles now, which is, I think, more political than it is technical to actually be able to succeed there. But it's kind of interesting to see, what started as like, oh, here's this web language thing, and we've just expanded it over time. So.
Wait, so like if somebody built the next, so I don't know anything about games, but if I did, I would say something like, if I was building a game in Unity and I wanted to like port it to the PlayStation 5, I could get Sentry.
Yeah, I think we're OEM. So we are fully OEM'd on the Nintendo Switch now.
Two as well?
Hypothetically, Death Stranding 2. I don't know if anybody knows what this is, but it's going to be like Game of the Year. I don't think we're in the current game, but we might be utilized in a port of the game unofficially, confidentially. I don't know. I'm just going to guess that it's probably true. But what's cool is like I'm a big gamer, and so this is like a low ROI fun thing to have in the company, in the sense of games is not like a big part of our business. But there's this French. It's just a weird industry. They do QA. We do production. It's like a really different world, right? Like, so like Riot Games has always been a real big customer, like League of Legends, but they look more like a tech company than they do a game company.
Sure.
And so it's just the way they approach it is like really weird. But what's cool?
Can you spill the beans? Do you know if anybody? Because my sense of it has just been that From Software, the makers of Elden Ring and Dark Souls, I thought they just left the bugs in as like a fun little treat for the fans, just to make them angry.
Yeah.
But are they using?
I don't actually know. So sometimes I don't know, especially these days. We have a lot of customers.
Sure.
Once in a while, somebody finds out because they're just such a fan. So like, there's that French game. I can't even remember what it's called. Like something 33, the RPG. But like the random like huge hit that was like unexpected from this like French company. I can't remember. I should know the name. It's kind of embarrassing. And we know it uses Sentry. Well, eventually we found that we found them in our like, CRM or whatever. But we didn't even think to look until somebody saw it in like like open source, a lot of these people that distribute software, they'll bundle the license packaging.
Sure.
And so like you see Sentry, like I think you see it in the license packaging and you see it on disk because there's like an exception reporter. And we're like, oh, cool. Yeah. And like there's people internally, they're like super excited. They're like, yeah, this game's awesome. It's great that they use Sentry. Right. And we're like, yeah, it's cool.
It is cool. And that makes perfect sense because games are one of those things where you still release to manufacturing, right? Like there's still a shipping date after which it's sort of in the wild, and you've got to just be able to hope what you've got on board is enough to get information out of it,
Yeah. Expedition 33. That's what it was called.
Oh, I haven't heard of this yet, which is awkward. Hold, please. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So, that's so cool. I never even thought about that. Games. Yeah, of course. That'd be a big thing. And that's hard. That's
software.
.NET and I guess there's C and stuff. What about like iPhone games and stuff? I guess you must be there as well, right? Like,
so we invest a lot in mobile. It's also kind of a weird industry too. Like web is exactly what most of us know. We know how it works. We know how businesses operate, like SaaS, right? And then everything else is just, I don't know. It's different. It's not as good from a business point of view. It's usually harder from a technology point of view. The companies are usually a little bit more like, I guess, like antiquated in the way they approach problems. They look more enterprisey, if you will, right? And so, but yeah, we do it everywhere. Mobile's like a big business. Like JavaScript, mobile, and then desktop are the three that we say are super, super important. Even though desktop's not like a big industry, but they're the ones where like, if something goes wrong, you just don't know. And so it's like really, really important to have something like Sentry there.
Yeah, I mean, so desktop applications are also. I don't know if that's a huge. You say it's not a big industry, certainly compared to the web. But why?
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people taking their React apps and turning them to React Native apps, and Bob's your uncle. You're on the desktop. Why not, right? Like,
it
seems reasonable.
Yeah, and it's like you look at some of the software you're using is like the most important, like Slack or something, like critical to your job, right? It's desktop software. It's written in JavaScript-ish, and one could argue it's web software, but it's still compiled and then like shipped somehow to your desktop, and so Sentry runs on all those things these days.
That's super good. And so I don't know about the other ones. I'm sure it's tailored to each idiom and all that. But for the Java one, it's just you add a library to the class path, specify a property or two.
It's pretty similar.
Most of it, it's super, super streamlined. Yeah. So, and you get these nice WYSIWYG, you get these nice visual displays of what's going on, activity, that thing. I know people can follow up and like send error reports, that kind of stuff, and well done. Okay, so why create that instead of becoming I mean, show me on the show me where the software hurt you, like why do this,
I have actually a great story. So how Sentry is born is like, you know how like founders always have these stories about like some random thing. Every single one I've ever heard, I'm pretty confident was a lie. Some of them factually I know were a lie. Mine, the truth is like somebody asked me how to do something. I wrote a 30-line snippet or something. I'm like, this is how I would do it. And then I'm like, oh, I'll poke at that. It's kind of interesting. No intention, nothing like that.
No way.
But I will tell you, the reason I always built, like I built a lot of like open source and a lot of developer tools. And Sentry, we're not open source anymore. We're something else, but we are a developer tool, and this started that way. And it was always out of this like, one, a desire to be lazy, and two, usually out of frustration. So a really good analogy for where Sentry has delivered value in my career is everybody's probably worked with that, like that one SRE or that one ops guy. And you're like, hey, I have this problem. I need to do this thing. And they're like, no. And
okay.
a good example of this, you have a bug, customer reports a problem to you. I'm like, oh, I need to log into this server to get the logs to debug this problem. And this is a real story, but it's like 20 years old. And they just wouldn't let me. Like they wouldn't actually let me have access to the logs on the server. And this is like a 10-person company, mind you. This is ludicrous that this is even a story. And Sentry existed already at this time. And I'm like, so I guess it's not quite 20 years ago. Either way, it's like 15 years ago, long enough ago. We
Wait,
usually
so
have
15 years old.
Sentry is 16-ish. Yeah.
Whoa.
But my answer was things like Sentry. Okay, like, cool. It's in the application. I can just add things. I can add new error events or whatever, and I'll just send them to Sentry, and I cut out the annoying SRE in my case, just so I can get my job done. So.
Well, I didn't know it was 60. Okay, so now I feel like I've been under a rock. Wait, so are you saying it's been a thing that all the cool kids here in the Bay Area have been using for 16 years, and I've just been only recently made aware of it thanks to a guy in Berlin? What's wrong with me?
Yes.
Oh.
To be fair, we are very much in like emerging tech. And what I mean by emerging tech is generally like you start new software, what tools do you reach for? And so JavaScript, huge focus for us. Like obviously we exist in Java and all these things, but we don't really invest in a lot of what is like more traditional enterprise technology, just because here's the analogy I give people. If you're a bank and you're going to develop new software.
Yeah.
Well, actually more importantly, if you're going to like buy new tools, you're probably buying new tools for new software, like new needs, not old needs.
Right.
And our value is when you change software, we tell you basically what you messed up effectively. The bank is not changing a lot of its sort of like legacy software, if you will. It's like it doesn't want to mess with that for the most part. So it's not going to look for new ways to spend money on it. But the bank will launch a new like mobile app or maybe a new web app or something like that. And so we really focus on like, you know, where new code is created versus older code. Doesn't mean there's not new Java in the world, right? But like relatively speaking to a lot of sort of the more, I don't know what you'd call them, but like the JavaScripts, the Rubies, the Pythons, the PHPs, there's a lot more of that, kind of the startup scene, if you will.
Right. Yeah. So there's a
Greenfield.
Greenfield.
Not doing a whole lot of brownfield.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's super cool. Like, I don't know. That's really, so for me, I always imagined it was sort of like I'm starting a new app and I've only got a small crew of humans working on it, and there are just some capabilities I'd just rather outsource, like figuring out error reporting and getting it right. It needs to get done, but I don't want to figure it out. In the same way, I don't want to figure out OAuth. You know, like I need security. Please, somebody else. Can I just pay you and you do it for me instead? You know, let me just build the thing that delivers business value. That's interesting. 16 years. Have there been cute billboards? Because I pay attention to billboards. Have they been on?
There's a new one.
What?
There's a new one right now. It's not as like big as that first campaign we did. The one you're talking about, the Sentry Can't Fix This campaign. That was our first ever. We don't do that many, though. I think we're going to do more.
So that's just it. Okay, I've been paying attention to billboards. Like those are fairly recent though.
Yeah. But we have a brand new one. We have a brand new one that says, make it make sense. And it's like a funny looking face. There's a few different ones, and it's got like, I don't remember what it is, but the eyes might be like pie charts or something. And they're like a little creepy. But our entire marketing agenda is like, you know, the concept of like rent free, like live rent free in your head. That's marketing for us. That's the only goal. It's not to sell like Sentry or pitch Sentry. It's like, if we can just get their interest, we'll figure the rest out along the way.
Right. Grab their attention. Deshaun adds, my last startup was using Sentry with Ionic framework, which is and he says very popular in the startup circles. Yeah, good point. Good to know. Well, that's super good. So, okay. So and that was 16 years ago, and you are now, are you the I know you're co-founder. I don't know what
I've
you
done a
do.
lot of things, and so I was a CEO for a long time. I hired a CEO right before COVID. Poor guy. But hired a CEO like 5-ish years ago, somewhere in that timeline, and then I actually hired a CTO last year. So I went from CEO to CTO, hired the CTO. Now I'm technically CPO, but it's I don't run the product org. We roll everything up into engineering, product, and design. I do a bunch of stuff, let's say. I do a lot of corporate strategy, so I'm super involved in the company still. But from
Sure.
an organization, what I do is I focus a lot on product strategy, which is more like sort of true R&D, like where are we going, keeping that going. I do a lot of weird I'm not a marketing guy for what it's worth, but I probably have become one. So I do a lot of marketing, like we own a podcast, for example, which reports up to me. And I have a few engineers that work on random stuff that
Yeah.
roll up to me. And like we were talking about, like I spoke recently at the AI conf, AI.engineer, and that was just on something I built for the company. It was like we have an MCP server that we launched, which I thought was like really interesting at the time. And I'm just like, I'm gonna go work on this. And so like I now do special projects, if you will.
Yeah.
But I'm no less involved than I ever was, for better or worse.
Oh
So
no, nobody
yeah,
insinuated
yeah,
otherwise.
yeah.
I'm sure you're actively involved. I was just wondering on what, like it sounds like you're involved in everything, which is the sign of a good founder. That's so cool. So your talk. Well, first of all, who's the other co-founder? Do we want to mention that?
My buddy Chris Jennings, he
Oh,
runs the creative organization. So I was always the engineer, but I value design, and I
yeah.
am not good at it, like many people. Um, and he was the person who had to deal with me valuing design and trying to make our product better. Like we used to joke, we have this company value, it's called Pixels Matter, but it used to
Yeah.
be padding matters, and it was generally because I would just complain at like misalignments and stuff. And I'm like, no, this is off a little bit, or this needs to be centered over here. And um, but yeah, and so it's just us two.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak duology.
Yeah,
I've seen that pattern before. That's good. That's a sign of good product. You need a little bit of both.
yeah.
Super cool. Okay, so you built Sentry. You're changing the world. You're on video game consoles, which is super interesting to me because I've never thought to look. I mean, I don't know. Is it just for the display of the errors, or does it just quietly record things even if it just crashes like hard
So
on the game?
we do a few things these days. So errors is like the bread and butter. It's what we started as. We do tracing, which is not actually that interesting as a thing. But what we do with tracing is we turn it into basically logs and metrics. You can do performance stuff too, but it's a way we think of it as like there's all this signal that helps you debug your application, right?
Sure.
Errors are a very, very strong signal. But then there are other things that help too. So we do that. We do session replay, which is like kind of like video replay, but from we capture events to reproduce what happens. We do a little bit of uptime monitoring. We do a bunch at this point, I would say. We're a large enough company, but our bread and butter errors, sort of core production telemetry, like the tracing logs, metrics. Actually, we do a lot now. I was gonna say we do continuous profiling as well. But
Wow.
like our kind of agenda is like you ship software, something goes wrong, software specifically, not servers. Can we help you figure out like basically what you changed in the code or what changed and help you
Yeah.
diagnose and fix that problem? And doing it everywhere is like really important to us. So
Cool. And it's a SaaS, right? So
yeah.
but it's all what's that like from a security perspective? Like, can you see the errors, or is it just the people
We can
who?
see all of the errors. I mean,
Okay.
it's like any SaaS. So like we do have some tenant isolation and stuff, but we technically have the ability to see customers' data because it goes to our servers. But yeah, it is like a traditional SaaS. We
Yeah.
do some weird stuff here and there for certain customers, and you can actually run it self-hosted. So what we
Oh,
ship to production is available on GitHub, but it's under something called the functional source license, which we created, which is kind of like. Do you know MariaDB? Like there's
yeah.
this license called the BSL, the business source license. It's effectively the same kind of thing. So you can use it with almost no strings attached. There's just a clause in there that says you can't basically compete with us from a cloud services point of view.
Yeah.
And after 2 years, it becomes Apache. So whenever we commit something to GitHub, it converts in 2 years to Apache licenses.
Good on you. That sounds like a very reasonable, especially with the deluge
Yeah.
of
That's basically our balance to the thing, like give ourselves a little bit of protection to stop frankly, to stop other businesses that are venture backed from doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But then also we want open source to exist in the world. We want more free software and we value it. And so it's kind of how we like make that trade-off.
Right on. That's super
And
cool.
just to drill into one thing, I think you said no servers there. So you don't really do servers like server telemetry, server error reporting. It's really focused on things that run client side. Is that
No,
was
so
I hearing that right?
we do anything that's like, think about your application. We do that. What we don't do is like report on disk space or
Gotcha.
CPU metrics.
Okay.
So we don't do any of that like traditional, like if you were like system monitoring, which is,
Yeah.
to be fair, lots of us these days don't run servers, so it doesn't matter. And I think we'd prefer to run fewer and fewer servers. But we
So
kind of avoid
you're
all
not
that. Yeah.
Nagios. You're not
Exactly.
Nagios,
Yeah.
but you could use Sentry in a Spring Boot application,
100%,
and that'd
100%.
be fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Any sort of like software language or framework we work totally fine in. We're just never going to monitor. We're never going to be the company where it's like, oh, we need to monitor these 1,000 servers and make sure the disks are functioning correctly. Or we're not Splunk is a good analogy. Like we're not going to just ingest random system logs that are valuable, but not valuable for I just shipped a new version of my software. What went wrong?
Gotcha. Nice.
I love that focus actually, and I to the extent that I can have my cloud platform be application focused, I love that. To the extent that I can have my whole world be application focused, I'm really happy there. That makes sense, and also it means that I have the tools as a programmer to inform how this thing reports, right? Whereas a lot of times you get these apps that are sat on top of something with an agent,
Exactly,
and that agent is just running below your realm. You have no ability to inform what's happening there. It's reporting stuff, but who knows if it's useful because you couldn't input. Super good. Yeah, that's super good. I don't know. Is there? So there's no. I just mentioned the agent thing where you're sort of above the context of the reporting, but do you have a sidecar thing as well if people do want that?
we kind of do. Oh, I think we do for Java specifically. It's weird because most people actually, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It like creates friction, and now all of a sudden you need a big IT deployment and stuff. And then once in a while you'll find like a very traditional company, and you're like, no, we need that. Otherwise, we can't get this out the door. But it is usually the trade-off of like you don't get as like the context of like the reporting is just like less good.
Sure. It's opaque.
And
you're looking at a black
yeah.
box.
But we do have a bunch of like honestly, we do everything these days. We've been around a long enough time, and it's something like I don't actually pay attention to our daily numbers, but it's something like 70,000 organizations pay for our cloud service at this point. And so I would say there's not a problem we don't solve at this point,
That's super cool. And so you're also usable, you said because you can run it self-hosted, there is a story there for fintech and governments and whatever, right? If they really want that privacy, that tenancy, they can have that. That's super good. This is the kind of stuff because I love black box solutions I can just pull in and set and forget. You know what I'm saying? Life is hard enough. My hair is. It's just a precious commodity at this point, and I don't have a lot to give away. So I'm always happy to hear about products like this and technologies like this. What's the AI story? Like what you did this talk and you raised some valid, very sort of thoughtful critiques of the state of MCP as it stands today. I like that video. I think James and I are both pretty, what's the right word, gung-ho about MCP, but with the proviso that there are,
it's early days.
It's early days. Mm-hmm. It's super early days, right? Like now, do you remember November? Because that's when it came out, and like it's been a roller coaster ride, but it has been a ride,
Yeah, we are. It's interesting because like, if you were any pre-existing company, like any company that was in business 5 years ago, there is probably this like sentiment where you're like, is there an existential threat? You kind of think about this. You're like, is the thing we built going to be less useful? Is it going to be not useful whatsoever? How are we going to adapt and stuff? And that actually is important. Like I think sort of what is happening is an existential threat to most companies, but we think about it that way too. And so we're like, okay, technology doesn't change, so that's good. So if you are building things that fundamentally enable technology, those things still all have to exist. And so we're like, okay, we can get rid of the pure anxiety part of the play, but we think a lot about like, well, what does change with it? And there's like a few things that I think are interesting. And for what it's worth, I'm always in like the dev tools lens, which again, it's like, how do I help myself? So everything in my world lives that way. And so I think about it from like, well, okay, there are things that are easier to do now that either were just way too tedious to do before or improbable to achieve. So like a really good example is a lot of Sentry's early tech was just a ton of like rule-based heuristics to fingerprint errors and to dedupe them. That's still really important, mind you. Like it's not like I could just ship that with an LLM overnight kind of thing, but we enrich that with embeddings now. And that allows us to do an even better job than we could have done before. Again, it was totally solvable before. It's just like it was an infinite cycle of we got to keep improving these heuristics, regex statements up to wazoo, you know. And so there's some cool stuff like that that tech enables, which like I think I was talking to somebody about this the other night. OCR is a really good analogy here, right? Like these things can actually OCR documents pretty well. It doesn't mean all of a sudden OCR is like a multi-trillion-dollar business or something. It didn't just raise the market cap. It also doesn't mean OCR is like worth nothing. Though I do think it makes something like OCR worth less money because it's easier to do, right? And so there's that. But then we also think a lot about, well, there's two other angles.
OCR is optical character recognition.
Oh, yeah. Turning a document into like, text. Well, turning a picture into text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
But the other two areas we think a lot about are like people are building that are different than before. So if you compare like, you know, we've at least lived through this, like data centers to cloud services to even like we're even past that, and we have been for a while, where a lot of things are like, say, serverless, if you will, or something like that. There's like a version of that too, and it's like, well, what are the constraints that change when the underlying way you build software changes? So think about new startups that are just building effectively shims on LLM APIs. To be fair, it's just APIs. Does the software they need change? Like, do their needs change? And they do, to be fair. Like a good analogy of this is like errors are still errors. That's fine. But the data you might, so our bread and butter early days with Sentry was like, there's an error and we'll show you like the web request that caused the error because the inputs are such a big deal. There's sort of a web request with these LLMs, but it's not quite. Right. It's like this chat thing in a lot of them, right? And so all of a sudden, like it's slightly different. So what they need is slightly different. And so we think a lot about like, well, what do they need? What do we enable them with? And so we do a bunch of like agent monitoring or LLM monitoring or something like this now, which is just curated. It's all the same kinds of tech. It's just curated in a different way, right?
Right.
And then sort of the third version is like, well, what new businesses can we create that we couldn't create before? Not just can we optimize some technology we had before, but can we create new products? I think we're still we're early days, but it is like changing like unbelievably fast. And I am not an optimist by any means. I am very like authentic when I say this. 6 months ago, I would like talk mad smack about any of this stuff. The last 6 weeks, I have not written a line of code by hand. And so, and it's not good yet. I try very hard to make this world work. It's still rough, but it is changing.
Okay, but what you just described is what the kids are calling vibe coding.
It's not even vibe coding. What I do, I spend a lot of time building the context around it, building documentation, building a spec. And I do that, to be fair, by prompting. And then I have it generate the thing, and it's garbage. And then I give it a lot of pointed instructions to generate it in a more correct way and to like do all these other things. But I would say what it is, it's still like, it's like systems design. It's like engineering. It's like the same decisions you would make engineering. I'm just not writing the actual code myself, but I'm still doing all the other things.
The actual code at this point, if you're running
sometimes it is fast. 100%. 100%. It's like it can be faster. But what's cool is like I sit in a lot of meetings.
Sure.
I'll kick off like an agent run and I'll come back. Sometimes it's pretty good. And so I've gotten a bunch of stuff done that actually would have taken me a little bit of time, especially if it's like boilerplate. You know, it's like, oh, I need an API endpoint or I need tests or whatever. It actually does a really good job of that. It has for quite a long time. But it's able to do a little bit more now. And we basically have this exercise with our MCP server, in fact, where only code gen. No, we say no humans allowed in this repository. And that's a production service. And it is doable. But yeah, sometimes it's like, it's obnoxious to say the least. And it just goes haywire. But you can see the promise. And I think what's important is it helps you understand what is possible, what isn't possible. Like what's make-believe, right?
Right. We're not there.
And you can kind of, yeah, exactly. We're not there. And you can kind of visualize, though, what maybe the next things would be. Like actually, the next unlocks would be.
Wait. So I'm going to, 16 years. You've obviously been doing this for more than a minute. And certainly James and I are, I've been in IT since 2002, and I was programming before that. So I think I'm a mediocre programmer, but I'm certainly not an entry level one, right? Like, and I don't think you are, and certainly James is not. And so is it possible that this process has been frustrating for you because you know what better looks like?
Yeah.
Or do you suppose there might be something to the advantage relative to where the LLM quality might be interesting to you if you don't know better,
Well, yeah, I think we've seen like two things. One, we've seen it has enabled productivity, to be clear. Even just like the tab complete in a lot of these is just like better, right? And then you'll see things where like somebody like our marketing leader can like sort of not really code something, but make something exist that has code in it,
Right.
Which is usually low quality, but it's fine,
Yeah.
And I will say a lot of times what I do is like, I could build all this stuff and I know what correct looks like. A lot of times it actually gets close enough to correct. And I actually equate it a lot to, I grew up in languages that didn't have like auto formatters. And so you would always have these arguments of like the syntax, the white space. I don't care. And especially once those arguments go away because like a tool just did it, I especially don't care. This feels a little bit like that. Like you still need correctness there. So it's not quite the same. And they're not good at a lot of things yet.
Yeah.
And you end up spending a lot of time like coaching it, if you will. And I spent a lot of time like building like sort of surrounding documentation so it'll do the right thing. Asterisk, it usually still doesn't. But it is genuinely like interesting now, I would say. And a year ago it was not that interesting. It was all BS, so.
Yeah. So I think that's actually vibe coding, though. Isn't that vibe coding? Is you just described as the cursor?
I refuse to call it vibe coding because that just sounds like you're sort of YOLOing it, and you're actually not. No, you don't understand systems design, or you don't you're not reviewing. Like I'm doing code review on my own code and all this. I'm doing everything you would do to build software. I'm just not literally typing the actual code itself. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so from my understanding, a lot of different code editors, whatever these like Cursor and all these, they have a folder where you're supposed to put a manifest that describes certain conventions and what you want and all that, and it can use that to inform its output. But so maybe vibe coding is a function of like who's driving the model. Like if it's a person who knows better, it's not vibe coding. If it's a person who does it, it's just like throwing at the wall, I don't know.
I don't know.
That's super cool. I think that there's a lot of potential here. And obviously, the real question everybody on top of everybody's mind is, which one are you using?
I use a lot of Claude Code and Cursor. Those are my two go-tos. I think they're the best in class, to be fair. They're both different. They have trade-offs. Mm-hmm. I prefer the IDE, like the Cursor UX. It's just easier to review the code and whatnot. Yeah. And I will tell you, in Claude, it's pure YOLO. And I'm sitting here in like GitHub afterwards, like reviewing and like, I gotta go prompt it to fix this now. But they're both like pretty good. And honestly, part of it is because like they support MCP really well, and we use the Sentry MCP quite regularly. Like we have this whole thing where like I have a flow where I can dump a Sentry link into either of those editors just fine and be like, hey, help me fix this. And it will reach out to one of our agents on the server and like pull down like this big root cause analysis. And it is like surprisingly good on like cryptic errors. I'm shocked. And it's partially because like the agents are pretty good at pattern matching. It's partially because we have all this context in Sentry from all the instrumentation we have. But it is when it works and you go through it, you're like, wow, this is just to like think about what you're doing. You're like, I'm not doing anything. I put a link into a thing and it just figured out a lot of stuff. Like, it's kind of amazing.
That's a win. The models are really interesting because they can. The reason I think vibe coding or whatever we're talking about is interesting is because even if it's not the final result, it helps get rid of that blank page problem. Like it just get me something and I can refactor my way to something successful. But it sounds like you're just committed to not. You're just going to prompt your way to production. Is that the idea? You won't ever modify the code?
Now, for what it's worth, results will vary here. Like this is like an isolated service, and even now it's actually hard because the more complex it gets, the harder it is to keep it on the guardrails. Sure. We have a big, like again, a lot of older companies, we have a big mono repo. That's like the main service in production. I think we can make it work there, and it works on like trivial things, whatever, which is still cool. Like if I can async, tell it to fix this trivial thing, and then go to my meeting and come back and it's ready, that's a win. That's still productivity, right? But anything serious like build this feature. Not a shot. Maybe we can get it there, but I actually don't think the models are capable enough yet. So
that's why we have these agentic frameworks, right? You got to like iterate. Okay, so we have some great questions here. Uh, first of all, is that MCP server available for users?
Yeah, mcp.sentry.dev, random domain we have. So
MCP.
it's effectively production. It breaks any given day of the week because we're constantly iterating on it. But generally speaking, it works really well.
Well, and plus, that's okay with AI. I think you've got like some on-device like air-gapped models that you can trust to be. I mean, there's no such thing as deterministic LLMs, but at least to the extent that nobody else has changed anything, that's more deterministic than, say, a hosted thing. But yeah, either way, I think that comes with the territory of dealing with AI is that there's some variability, and that's okay.
Yeah, the security angle is quite scary, to be fair, as well. So, but that, somebody else's problem.
We definitely got to talk about that in a second. The other question is, are you using Spring AI to build your MCP service?
Hey, you couldn't pay me to write Java. Sorry. I'm all JavaScript. I don't like JavaScript any better, mind you, but I'm all JavaScript all the time just because of I go wherever the momentum is, frankly. It helps me understand our customers best, but it's all in TypeScript.
Oh. Makes me sad.
Sorry, Josh. I did want to hop back real quick. So there is, I think, an emerging term for this type of coding last week we released a new agentic IDE called Kiro, and it tried to coin this spec-driven AI IDE thing. And I think it makes a lot of sense in this kind of realm. It's like write your spec, write a good spec, write all your constraints, and then derive from that. And obviously you can probably do some of that in other AI tools, but I do wonder if that's kind of a different angle than vibe coding. I imagine vibe coding is this like you said, YOLO, quick iterations where you're iterating prompt after prompt after prompt, whereas why don't you iterate on the spec instead and get your spec to be descriptive enough that it can produce what you want? So I kind of like the spec-driven approach more, at least for my use. And maybe it is the spectrum we were talking about, where more experienced developers do want to work a little differently than other developers. So
yeah, my take, I don't even think it's controversial, is I think it's all the same engineering we did before. It's exactly the same. I'll give you an analogy. I basically do TDD with it, test-driven development, because it's more reliable. Now, it'll often generate an annoying degree of mocks that I do not want, but it's whatever approach you take to get the best results, as long as you're actually still designing the system and you're sort of accountable for how it works and all this stuff, I think it doesn't really matter. Whereas vibe coding for me just screams it's just this kid thing. It just doesn't feel like it's just, I can't get behind the term. And I do build specs with it. I actually tell the thing to write the spec, to be clear. And then I'm yeah, that spec's fine. But I also don't write the spec. I prompt it until the spec's good.
Yeah.
And I think you just get better results that way, frankly. And you also have the verification you can do that way. And so, but yeah, it just feels almost like a new programming language in a lot of ways. But I also imagine this will change in time too. So
yeah.
New paradigm.
Yeah.
Well,
and then so since you're doing TypeScript, do you have any thoughts on the effect library? I just started building some MCP stuff with the effect library and thought they're doing some pretty interesting things around MCP and schema stuff, but I don't know if
I think it's interesting. I'm not an expert. I haven't used it for what it's worth. I already have a lot of pain with TypeScript. It's already where people have kind of the complexity they built into types, just everything goes to a crawl. I guess it probably doesn't use the GPU, but my 4090, my NVIDIA card is just always on fire. The CPUs are always on fire. And I'm not doing anything. And so I think there's been a lot of over engineering of using, the TypeScript server to solve what honestly is solvable in other ways too. And in fact, looks interesting. It doesn't look like TypeScript or JavaScript to me, which I have a problem with. For example, I'm not a big fan of modern Python, even though I grew up in Python. I just don't like the type system that they added. I think it actually ruins Python for me. It was a great language back then. It was fast to iterate, fast to test, easy to read. Good luck with some of that now. And I think TypeScript, great, dialect and syntax and all this stuff. In fact, I don't know really at the end of the day, but it's not the same thing all of a sudden. It's a different language. It is truly a framework, right?
DSL, yeah.
I've just been burned enough by these, especially now. This is what's great. LLMs need context. It's just pattern matching. If it's hard for a human to reason about something because we just look at language, it's hard for the machine to reason about it. And I actually think we're going to I'm hoping that we see a shift where a lot of these things are implicit, which is usually a problem for people to like get up to speed with. I just think those are going to slowly, we're going to shift away from those things. And in fact, it really isn't that. It's pretty explicit. But I do think there's something to be said about like the more obvious the implementation to you, the more obvious it's going to be to the language model, and just the
Yeah.
more productive you're going to be at the end of the day. So
This is one of the reasons. I mean, so I'm a big Python fan, and I slightly disagree. I think the types have actually. I don't like the way they did it. You're right, but I don't think types themselves are the problem. Because in quite the contrary, I'm in the Java and Kotlin space, and there we have Kotlin more so, but they're both good type systems compared to the grafted on ignorable suggestions that are Python types.
That's what I think it is. It's not that types are bad. It's that I don't think Python's implementation is good, and I don't think every language has to be statically typed. That's totally okay, right? Like
that right there. But that said, just like you said, having that context available does make it a lot easier for LLMs to do a good job generating code. And so Java code tends to compile and run correctly, as opposed to what you get out of a older Python generated from the LLMs. Because of the types. It's just, we hope this does what the method name says, but there's no guarantee, Interesting. So that MCP server, I really want to try it. Actually, I work on the Spring team, and the Spring team we have Spring AI, which is a project for doing AI engineering, and we donated the source code for our MCP SDK to the Model Context Protocol Foundation back in November, right? So when it first came out, a few weeks later, we had a Java SDK. We're the second SDK ever, right? And then we rebased our integration in Spring AI on top of that. And so it's trivial to pull in other MCP services, and I kind of want to see what we could build with pulling in Sentry and pulling in some of these other MCP services. But you're right. The more tools you give your AI model to play with, sometimes it goes off in the weeds when you have to focus it. Is your MCP service, I'm sorry if you said this and I missed it, is it a standard IO or is it remote SSE, HTTP?
Technically, we have both, but we really push the remote thing because it's fast iteration. Standard IO is mostly for self-hosted, where it just breaks all the time because of version incompatibility anyways.
Right.
But as soon as I refused to sort of support it until the remote spec came out, because I'm like, okay, now it makes sense. I've at least got OAuth, so security's a little bit better, ignoring prompt injection and everything else. And I would like to say we are state of the art. Like we do a lot of things like we run 2 agents through the MCP that will pass up. There's a lot of just especially in the TypeScript space, we have first class instrumentation, all this stuff in it, and it's pretty well maintained and pretty forward leaning. It's not, we just took our, one of my arguably not controversial statements I made in that talk was MCP is not your open API spec exposed over MCP. It just doesn't work, right? And so we do a lot of persuasion of prompts even within our MCP server. And it's really primarily designed for things like Claude Code and Cursor, where it's these chat-based agents. But it's you ask it to fix an error, and it's going to help the agent understand what to do next and things like that by, prompt engineering, which is kind of a silly term as well, but basically by influencing the prompt through its responses and stuff. So we do a bunch of stuff like that in there that I think has worked pretty well. It's still a little bit, this is the vibe part for sure. You're still a little bit the vibes of does it feel like it's working well enough, or there's something we should change, And that's an every 3-month problem. So.
Oh, that's so good. So good.
Real quick, did I hear you right in that your MCP server actually has an agent in it, underneath it, or was
we have 2 agents that run? There are 2 tool calls that are call out to other agents. One's embedded, and the other is our sort of root cause analysis service we call SEER, which is a newer product we released on Sentry. That's the thing that basically does effectively a large map reduce on Sentry telemetry, and then exposes a big root cause analysis, as well as a pretty mediocre suggested fix right now. But we farm out into both of those agents when possible. The search one is particularly valuable because it translates natural language into, frankly, what's a complicated search syntax. So
that's cool. And that's something that I've been talking about, and Josh and I have talked about, is the idea that sure, you can expose this MCP server that's, I don't know, like a natural language way to talk to your database or whatever. But I think the more interesting uses are when you actually wrap the agent with an MCP server so that it's easy to then consume from other agents and interact with from other agents. So
I agree.
Cool.
I think the only gap is, the gap is you just don't have a streaming response. And so when it farms out to our one remote agent, which this remote agent takes like 5 minutes or something, it's slow. And so you're just sitting there with no like user feedback until it's done. And it's like, it's not a great experience. For fast agents, it doesn't matter, but.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Very good point. So that becomes a kind of a gateway protocol, is the MCP stuff.
Yeah. And it's great because like it's like integrations, but where you don't know where it's almost like when you built like a public API in a lot of ways. And it's, I don't know, it's for the unknown unknowns in a lot of ways. Like you roughly know how this might be used, but not really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just have your AI code assistant help get you there, and it's going to figure out what tools to call with what parameters. And
well, that's the other thing I love. That variability in these models is one of the other, I mean, you may have shipped a feature for people that you didn't know you shipped because those models are actually pretty smart and they may be able to solve, there's, it used to be you shipped some code, it either did or didn't do the thing, but now these models have a little wiggle room. You might have solved their problem already just by, saddlebacking on these AI models.
So real quick, is the user scenario for some of this stuff, like I'm in my AI code assistant, I'm writing some code. So I'm in the code base that I have connected up to Sentry. And then from that code assistant, I talk to the Sentry MCP server, and then it can help me like resolve an issue, fix some code, fix a bug, whatever, faster because it has the kind of production oriented error diagnostic kind of information in my code assistant that I'm already working in.
That's the idea. Like we're not going to build like a chat bot for you to like try to do this. Like Cursor, Claude Code, they're all fucking great. And so it's like bring the context where it matters. And I think that's like a key thing right now is just context management, right? And there's a world where you can take a stack trace and unrelated to Sentry, you can take a stack trace and those agents will actually do a pretty like a tolerable job. And if it's trivial, they'll definitely just fix it one shot. And we sort of just like, we do that at the baseline. And then we go farther with this SEER thing, which is like, okay, also we're going to ingest like every part of the trace. And we're actually expanding this more and more, but we'll just like all this data, which we're probably not going to expose in the same way. We just keep this like sort of behind the scenes, if nothing else, because of the huge amount of data that we'd have to funnel around. And that one's actually like pretty impressive. I will tell you, like, I'm a skeptic by nature, which right now is an interesting time to be a skeptic. And when I was shown a demo of our new product, I'm like, look, it's not going to work on this. This is exactly the kind of thing. I know why it's not going to work. And I run it and it's like, this is the root cause. And I'm like, see, it just made up something. The next day, one of our engineers was like, hey, this is, I think, on the MCP service. They're like, hey, the MCP service is broken with this error. I'm like, are you kidding? And it was like literally the thing it thought was the root cause. And I'm like, it was just like blown away. I'm like, we can just ship this. We can just turn this on. It's fine. It's good enough. Let's go.
Wow.
And it makes sense because they're really good. If you give it a lot of information and the context to match it against, like it's pretty good at pattern matching. So,
yeah.
Oh, so nice. Good. Mindful of time here. You've got 4 minutes apparently. Can you speak to the OAuth story and tell us what's the next step? What should people be looking for? And then finally, are you on the internet? Do you want to be found? And if so, where can people find you?
All right. OAuth story in MCP. OAuth's pretty good.
You're browsing.
Yeah. Like we implemented it. So like we shipped in a couple days from when the OAuth spec was out there. We partnered with like Cloudflare to do that just because they had this great shim. So if anybody doesn't know, MCP requires OAuth 2.1, which I don't know about you all, but I did not know that was a thing until recently. I did not know until I needed to know with MCP. And it includes like this very particular feature called client registration, which basically means dynamic OAuth clients can register. Anyway, so we didn't have that support we had an OAuth provider, but we didn't have a 2.1 OAuth provider. So we wrapped it because Cloudflare built these like open source bindings to do it. Shipped that in like a couple of days. It was super easy, honestly. We shipped it in a couple of days. And I think it's easy in like, it's easy in any language as long as there are MCP bindings for that language. Like the SDK exists for that language because the server is not totally fun to build. But yeah, and it works pretty well. Like you load up like a Claude or a Cursor and like Auth is native and it just manages it for you. So you don't have to think about it. There's no click some buttons in a UI to create a token or anything like that. It's all automatic. You might get a web browser prompt. It looks like OAuth, you know, and so it works pretty well.
Nice. And that was not the case. Obviously, the spec was in a much poorer state just 4 months ago, right? It's come.
Yeah. I think
now.
OAuth was like April or something.
Yeah,
I can't quite remember.
There was 2 iterations of it. The
Yeah.
first one was not great because it combined the like resource server and the auth server.
Yeah,
or whatever.
we are on the first one, to be fair, but
Okay.
at some point I will migrate this over.
Yeah.
So that's part 1. Then part 2 was what's the next? What should people
next?
be looking forward to? Is there a conference you got, a talk people should see, a thing they should buy? Where do
I would say, first off, if you're interested in this stuff, you can follow me on Twitter, presently known as X. I am Zeeg, which is just a made up word. Don't think too hard about it. It's kind of like Zerg, but with an extra E. I don't know. I'm very much just like in the weeds. I'm authentic. I am who I am. I speak whatever I'm interested in at the time. And so I'm spending a lot of time building stuff these days. We're doing a lot of this at Sentry, trying to honestly right now, like the name of the game and is just use this stuff, learn what it's good at, learn what's real, what's not real. And I'm spending a lot of time on that. Like to my point where I'm like, I refuse to write code by hand right now, for better or worse. And it's quite interesting. You know, Sentry's we're going to continue evolving our products in this space. We have some really good stuff around like MCP and agent monitoring, which is actually just like straight up out of the box useful. Probably more so. I don't know if we have, I'm not sure where we're at on the Spring side. We mostly have like tried to get it out the door for Python just because it's a big AI ML scene, right? And TypeScript just because TypeScript is huge. But we've got a bunch of that stuff. We're also doing some stuff like we're doing like AI code review. We'll see how that goes. It's slightly different because we're also combining it with static analysis. I'm pretty excited for that. I was talking to our compliance guy and I'm like, so what happens if I code generate the stuff and then I approve the PR that the bot wrote the code of? Does that count? Like, and then like, what if we have another bot validate the code? Like how do we get humans out of this loop as much as possible so I can just ship my own code, you know? But I think we're still a little ways from that.
AI fooding it. I think we answered everything. This has been great. I've learned a lot. I think Deshaun says that the conversation makes me feel like embeddings and vector databases have been huge for Sentry.
Yeah,
seems fair.
100%. I would say they've been great. They're still hard to leverage to what I feel like their potential is. I think that one's like a trickier. Whereas LLMs, you just send some stuff at them and maybe get something useful back. Embeddings are like you got to actually be pretty thoughtful about how you're going to use this. Because like even with RAG, it was like quite complicated to get the right results from it. But they've definitely been like very valuable for us.
Yeah, well said. This is good. Thanks.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody
David.
for
Nice
hanging
to
out.
meet you. That's fun.
Bye.